Okay, so this is episode 2 of how to read Warcraft logs. I tried to do it fast, but it's going to be a lot different than reading the damage portion of the logs. When you look at damage taken, it's primarily for tanks in your raid to review this bit and find out what's kicking their ass. Um, Damage dealers and healers can refer to it as well to find out what's killing them or hurting them, and you can use this to correct those issues. So let's get into it. This is the front page of one of our raids logs. As I mentioned in the last bit about the damage done section, there's a bunch of tabs at the top here. I mentioned we're going to be going into damage taken, so let's start there. All right, so scroll down, not that far. You have your all friendlies, all sources, tabs, timeline, events, queries, your damage taken graph when heroes pop, and all the numbers for all the people in the raid and all the percentages and stuff. It's pretty clear who our two tanks are. It should be fairly obvious on just about every fight, with a few exceptions like Sakathar, but anyways, we're going to find out what's going on with these tanks. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but we're just going to review it and see what's going on. So a few things to keep in mind. One's obviously a Brewmaster tank, as you can see by the picture here, and the other one's a Warrior tank. And our Warrior is slightly more gear than our Brewmaster, so he should be taking less damage, right? And by first glance, it appears he is. His bar is smaller, right? Took less damage, it looks like he was doing better. But that's not entirely the case. If you drag your cursor over top of bars here, that gives you a little bit more information as to what's going on. So, first of all, it tells you how much damage was intaken, which is the normal. It tells you how much was absorbed, which is, just below it, and mitigated by block or stagger, things like that. This actually also tells you, without even having to drag over, if you just look at the bar, the darker area that's split apart is actually how much was absorbed, how much damage he took, I should say. And the lighter area is how much damage they actually took. So by looking at that, we can actually see here that Illumis took less damage than Zerster. So you might be thinking to yourself, how's that possible? He's 719 and our Warrior tank is 726, so what's going on here? His 7 item level is lower, he should be squishier, but he's doing better and he's absorbing more. So something to keep in mind first of all, and I'll look at it later here in a second, but certain tanks have better self-healing and absorbs than others. Warrior tanks heal for very little and they rely more on healers and block damage, whereas paladins, death knights, druids, and monks will heal for a ton, or they'll heal themselves for a ton, and rely less on healers and do a little bit more with themselves. Okay, so back to what we were saying. Our higher gear tank is taking more damage than our less gear tank. Now why is that? Again, but this time you have to drag your cursor over the bar and look at the extra information. Underneath the normal, the absorbed, and the mitigated block stagger damage, you'll see a bunch of other information underneath that. Now the important bit you want to look at is the actively tanking bit there, and for our monk it says he was actively tanking 81%. What that means is for 81% of the fight he was tanking something, whether it be a boss, whether it be an ad, whether it be multiple ads, something was punching him in the face for 81% of the fight. That means 19% of the fight he was running around, kiting something, bubbled, who knows, depends on the fight. And when you look at our warrior tank, and you look at the actively tanking portion, for him it says he was actively tanking 98% of the fight. So already you can see there that there is a 17% difference. So what that means is that our warrior tank was tanking something, whether it be an add or a boss, who knows at this point, but he was tanking stuff for 17% more of the fight. And that's where this little sliver of a difference comes into play. That is why our warrior tank actually ended up taking more damage than our monk tank, even though he's higher geared. Not by much, but slightly. So simply looking at a bar at first glance doesn't tell you the whole story as to what's going on. If you just take a minute and look at the information given, once you know how to properly read it, you can find out what's really happening here. So truth is, yeah, Warrior's taking more damage, but he's also tanking more. So our monk should maybe help out just a touch more, and it'll balance out pretty evenly, and everything will be super fine. So next thing to look at, well, you don't have to, but if you're in a tanking class with lots of self heals, it's good to look at. We can go into the healing tab, and well, scroll down, and you can see clearly that our monk tank does a lot more healing than our warrior tank, and that's normal. But this seems almost like too wide of a gap. I mean, I know warriors only have shield barrier for absorbs, and they don't really have much for self-healing, if any, but it should be slightly higher, I'd imagine. As far as our monk, that looks fairly accurate, especially compared to our other healers. So the third thing you can look at when you're reviewing performance as a tank is that tanks nowadays have active mitigation. Every tank has one form of it. Prot paladins have Shield of Righteous. Prot warriors have Shield Block. Monks have Stagger. Bear druids have Savage Defense. Deathknights have Death Strike. That's your active mitigation. It's a form of damage reduction you can use fairly frequently and almost instantaneously whenever you want. And it's something you'll be using a lot throughout the fight to soak up the majority of the damage you take. Apart from your major cooldowns like Shield Wall or Guardian of Ancient Kings, things like that. So to see if your tanks are using their active mitigation and various other, defensive cooldowns, things like that, you just want to click on the buffs tab at the top. It's actually right next to the healing and just 2 over from damage taken. And when we go in here, you're going to see a whole lot more stuff. If you scroll down, the first bit we're going to look at here is damage buffs. Now this doesn't really matter. This is every single buff, whether it be a proc or a static one, that every player in your raid receives throughout the fight. And these bars in the middle here is the uptime. This is basically a visual representation of when the buff was up and when it was down. So for Tiger Power here, 95% uptime. As you can see a little bit on the start and at the very end, it was missing, and a little clip bit there was down for a second. So, and then it shows you that for every damage buff. More importantly, though, we're going to be looking at the defensive buffs. In here, you're going to find the various buffs you need, but as you can see again, this list is gigantic. It's full of every raid member's buff throughout the entire fight, and you don't want to look through that. That's a pain in the ass. That takes forever. So you're going to scroll back up, and here we're going to select all friendlies, and we're going to take a look at our warrior tank. So go over to his name and click on it. Okay, so once you have your person selected, we'll scroll back down, and here you can see all of his damage buffs. Again, we're not worried about that. We're going to be focusing on the defensive buffs. So in here, Warrior's active mitigation is Shield Block and Shield Barrier. So we're going to be looking for those first. Those are the main ones we're concerned with. And first here we see Shield Barrier. and the count says it was used 9 times, and here are the various points throughout the fight where it was used. It's fairly spread out. It seems like it's almost used when needed rather than as much as possible, but that's fine, that's an extra absorb when he needs it, so alright. His rage can be going to other things like shield block. But if we look at shield block here, this is kind of concerning. It was only pressed 2 times throughout the fight. Once right here, and once right here. So all the rage that our warrior tank was building up throughout the fight, where is all this rage going? He should be using some form of active mitigation. He's used a couple shield barriers, but that should be, shield block should have a way higher active time than 3% of the fight. So that's a bit concerning, and if you see something like this with your tank, whether it be a Death Knight not using Death Strike, or a prop paladin not using Shield of Righteous, you might want to address that with them and find out what's going on. They could be dumping into things like Heroic Strike, or Pally could be just using Word of Glory on himself to self-heal, and depending on the situation, sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it's actually good. But active mitigation is something you want to be using as much as possible, and like we found out earlier, he has 98% active tanking time on this fight, so he was taking hits for 98% of this timeline, and he was only using his shield block for 3% of it. So that's a lot of time where he wasn't using shield block and he could have. And of course you can see other things here, like a hand of sack he received when he hit his major cooldown shield wall, things like that. And again here, you can just scroll down a little bit and look at healing buffs. This will essentially tell you all the healing buffs that he receives specifically throughout the fight, and again, their uptime, so things like Beacon or Shield obviously should be, whenever he needs it, so 100%. And then there's other things like Rejuve, which was on him fairly frequently, along with Riptide, Life, Bloom, Germination, Rejuve. He had a lot of heals going on him fairly frequently throughout the fight, and that was probably needed due to the lack of active mitigation. Other things you received, powered shields, living seed healing stream totem, and everything else. And if you scroll down, there's some less important shit like movement buffs and ray buffs. These should all be 100% if it's a kill and no one dies. However, as you can see here, we lost with Blade Cunning 2/3 of the way through the fight. So obviously our buffer who is giving us that would be our rogue. He probably died off at this point, or just fell off a cliff, or ran away and just disappeared because we never got that buff back. So that's pretty much it for looking at tanking performance. Again, you can hit the problems tab and go in there and see what shit you're standing in. That's a whole other mess to explain those, so maybe another time. But primarily, damage taken. Let's just hit the X here. Damage taken. Look at how much you took versus how much was mitigated or absorbed. Read the finer details, find out your active tanking time. See if you're actually, tanking stuff or not. You can look at your healing depending on your class, see if you're using your self-healing properly. And of course, your buffs, and look at your defensive buffs. That's really important to monitor your active mitigation. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I'm sure there's even more you can dig into to find out more. You could look at tanks interrupting certain ads. God, I don't even know what else. You could look at damage done. You could find, prop paladin or blood DK's active mitigation through that by looking at if they're using Death Strike or Shield of Righteous again. That's pretty much it for looking at tanks. or at least the damage taken portion of the tanks. So hopefully this helps you guys out. It's primarily for my guildies. I guess if anyone wants to check it out, that's cool too. And thanks for watching.